His hands are wrapped in gauze that has already turned gray, not from this morning, from a night 2 years ago that burned the skin off both palms. The man sitting in this Amtrak does not need to be here. He has a Medal of Honor in a drawer back in California. He has a wife who is 27 weeks into a marriage that has not yet seen a single peacetime morning. He has a standing offer to spend the rest of this war shaking hands with senators and smiling for cameras. He turned all of it down. Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone is riding toward an island called Iwo Jima. It is February 19, 1945. He is 28 years old. By 10:30 this morning, he will be dead. This is not a story about how he died. This is a story about why he went back. John Basilone was born in Buffalo, New York on November 4, 1916, sixth of 10 children in an Italian-American household. His father, Salvatore, had emigrated from a village near Naples. His mother, Dora, raised the family in Raritan, New Jersey. He finished the 8th grade and quit school, caddied at the local country club, found odd jobs around town. He was restless in the way that young men are when their world feels too small. The streets of Raritan were quiet and predictable. John Basilone was neither of those things. At 18, he enlisted in the United States Army. They assigned him first to the 16th Infantry at Fort Jay on Governor's Island. Then they sent him across the Pacific to the Philippines. He served with the 31st Infantry in Manila. The heat was brutal. The training was relentless. But Basilone thrived in it. He boxed competitively in Manila, won fights in smoky Army gymnasiums where soldiers bet their pay on the outcome. He was strong and fast and absolutely unwilling to go down. He told stories about the island so often his buddies gave him a name, Manila John. It fit him like the uniform he never wanted to take off. But the Army enlistment was 3 years. When it ended, Basilone came home to New Jersey, moved back in with his family in Raritan, got a job driving a laundry truck through the same streets he had grown up on, delivered clean linens to people who had never heard of Manila and never would. He tried to make it work. He lasted less than a year. The truck felt like a cage. The route felt like a circle. And somewhere across the Pacific, something was building that would need men like him. In June 1940, he walked into a recruiting office. This time, he joined the Marines. They sent him to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. First, he rose through the ranks quickly. Corporal, then sergeant. Then they sent him to a place no one back home had heard of. An island in the Solomon Chain. Guadalcanal, that name would mean nothing to most Americans in the summer of 1942. By the end of October, it would mean everything to John Basilone and to the 3,000 Japanese soldiers who walked into his machine guns. Henderson Field was a dirt airstrip the Japanese had been building when the Marines invaded in August 1942. The Americans seized it and named it after a Marine aviator killed at Midway. Then they spent 3 months trying not to lose it. Guadalcanal was the first major Allied land offensive in the Pacific. 9 months after Pearl Harbor, the Americans were finally pushing back. But the supply lines were thin. The Navy had taken heavy losses in the waters around the island. The Marines on the ground were undersupplied, underfed, and riddled with malaria. They held Henderson Field because losing it meant losing the Southern Pacific. The Japanese understood what that airstrip meant. Whoever held Henderson Field controlled the air over the Southern Solomons. Whoever controlled the air controlled the supply lines. Whoever controlled the supply lines decided the fate of every man on the island. They were not going to let the Americans keep it. By mid-October 1942, 15,000 fresh Japanese troops had landed on Guadalcanal. A regiment-strength assault force was moving through the jungle toward the Marine perimeter. 3,000 men aimed at one stretch of the line. That stretch was called Coffin Corner. It was held by Lieutenant Colonel Lewis B. Chesty Puller's battalion. Puller was already a legend in the Marine Corps. He would become the most decorated Marine in history. But on this night, his name would not matter. What mattered was the sergeant at the far end of his line. John Basilone with 2 sections of water-cooled Browning heavy machine guns. 16 men. The Japanese were bringing 3,000. That ratio was about to define the rest of Basilone's life. Just after 10 o'clock on the night of October 24, the jungle exploded. 3,000 Japanese soldiers of the Sendai Division charged the marine perimeter. Grenades and mortar rounds ripped into Basilone's position. The darkness was absolute. The noise was total. The only light came from muzzle flashes and exploding ordnance. A runner reached him with a report. The 2 guns on his right flank had jammed. 2 men were dead. 3 more were wounded. That entire section was gone. Basilone did not wait for orders. He did not radio for reinforcements. He did not fall back to a secondary position. He lifted a machine gun onto his back and ran toward the breach. A Browning M1917 weighs over 90 pounds. Water jacket, receiver, tripod, and belt. He carried it at a dead sprint through mortar fire. He reached the gap in the line. 8 Japanese soldiers were already through. They had breached the perimeter. If more followed, the entire position would collapse. Basilone killed all 8. But the guns were clogged with mud. The ammunition belts were soaked. And a few yards away, in the darkness beyond the wire, the next wave was already forming. What happened over the following hours would earn him the Medal of Honor. What it cost him would never fully heal. Basilone stripped mud from the ammunition belts with his bare hands. He cleared the jams, fired 1 gun, ran to the next, fired that one, back and forth in the darkness. 1 man doing the work of an entire squad. The Japanese kept coming, wave after wave, screaming charges across the wire. Bodies stacking on the barbed wire until the dead formed bridges for the living. The noise was beyond anything training could prepare a man for. Grenades detonating in the mud, mortar shells bursting in the canopy above, the sound of men dying in 2 languages. When ammunition ran low, he did something no one asked him to do. He left his position, ran through Japanese-held territory, alone in the dark. Through the ground that was crawling with enemy soldiers, he found an ammunition supply point, loaded himself with belts, and ran back. He did this more than once. At some point in the darkness, he picked up the Browning and fired it from his hip. A water-cooled machine gun fired from the hip like a rifle. The barrel was so hot it burned through his hands. 3rd-degree burns on both palms. The skin blistered and split, and he did not stop firing. By the end, he was fighting with a pistol and a machete. The machine gun ammunition was nearly gone. He had no gloves. He had no relief. He had no guarantee that dawn would come before the Japanese broke through. Dawn came. PFC Nash Phillips, fighting beside him, remembered what he saw when the light returned. Basilone was barefooted. His eyes were red as fire. His face was dirty black from gunfire and sleeplessness. He had a .45 tucked into the waistband of his trousers. He had come by to check on the wounded. Phillips never forgot him. When the sun came up, the Marines counted the bodies. 1,000 Japanese died in front of Basilone's section alone. Of the 16 men who had held that line through the night, only 2 or 3 were still standing. John Basilone had held Coffin Corner. Henderson Field belonged to the Americans. It would never be seriously challenged again. He had won. That should have been enough. They brought him home. In May 1943, Basilone received the Medal of Honor in a ceremony in Australia. He was the first enlisted Marine to earn it in the war. Chesty Puller had pushed hard for the recognition. He knew Basilone had been the glue that held the line together that night at Henderson Field. The citation was signed by President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The news reached the American public, and they made him famous overnight. The Marine Corps sent him on a war bond tour, parades through American cities, handshakes with politicians, a visit to New York Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia for photographs, a hometown welcome in Raritan that drew an estimated 30,000 people. His mother cried. His father shook his hand and could not let go. The whole town turned out for a boy who had left as a laundry truck driver. Everyone wanted a piece of Manila John. The War Bond Committee wanted his face on posters. The newspapers wanted his story in headlines. The public wanted a hero they could see and touch. And John Basilone, the man who had held off 3,000 soldiers with burned hands, stood on stages and smiled. He posed for pictures. He signed autographs. He did what they told him to do. And he hated every minute of it. He requested a return to combat. Denied. He requested again. Denied. The Marine Corps offered him a commission, a path to becoming an officer. He turned it down. They offered him a permanent instructor position. He turned that down too. He told anyone who would listen exactly where he stood. I ain't no officer, and I ain't no museum piece. The men he had fought beside on Guadalcanal were still in the Pacific. Some of them were dead by now. Some of them were bleeding on islands whose names he would never learn in time. And Basilone was standing on a stage in a pressed uniform, selling war bonds. Selling the war to people who would never hear a shot fired in anger. He understood why they needed him to do it. He understood the bonds paid for the bullets. He understood the math. He did not accept it. Because when he closed his eyes, he could still hear the guns at Henderson Field. He could still feel the heat of the barrel through his hands. He could still see the faces of the men who did not come home. And he was supposed to smile and shake hands and pretend that standing on a stage was the same as standing on the line. It was not. He kept asking to go back. And they kept telling him no. The Marine Corps saw a propaganda asset. Basilone saw a betrayal. His men were dying while he was performing. That tension was about to break. They finally relented. Not all the way. Not to send him back to combat. They assigned him to Camp Pendleton in California as a machine gunnery instructor, training replacements for the next assault in the Pacific. It was the closest they would let him get to the war. For now, it was enough. And then something unexpected happened. Her name was Lena May Rigi. Sergeant, Marine Corps Women's Reserve. A field cook stationed at Camp Pendleton. Born in Portland, Oregon to Italian immigrant parents. Every female Marine on that base knew who John Basilone was. His face had been in the newspapers. His name had been on the radio. Most of them wanted to meet him. Lena Rigi was not impressed. She saw another patronizing Marine returning from war. Another celebrity who could get the best tables at the nicest restaurants. She barely nodded when they were introduced. Basilone liked that. She was tough. She did not fawn. She treated him like a man, not a monument. He later said he knew right away. She was exactly what he was looking for. They fell in love fast, the way people do when they know time is borrowed. They married on July 10, 1944, at St. Mary's Star of the Sea Church in Oceanside, California, a small wedding. Marines in dress uniforms, Lena in white. John smiled in a way the cameras had never caught before. They talked about what life would look like after the war, picked out names for their first boy and first girl, made plans for a house, made plans for a future that assumed he would come home. When the orders came, Lena did not cry. Basilone had gotten what he had been demanding for over a year. A return to combat. C Company, 1st Battalion, 27th Marine Regiment, 5th Marine Division. Their target was an 8-square-mile volcanic island 660 miles south of Tokyo, Iwo Jima. 21,000 Japanese soldiers were dug into tunnels 35 feet underground. The Marines estimated it would take a few days to secure. It would take 36 days and cost nearly 7,000 American lives. Basilone shipped out in August 1944. Trained his men at Camp Tarawa in Hawaii for 5 months. Among his trainees were 2 teenagers, Chuck Tatum, 17 years old, who had enlisted with his parents' permission, and Clifford Evanson, just as green. They had never seen combat. Their instructor had a Medal of Honor and third-degree scars on both hands. He ran them harder than any drill instructor they had known. He made them strip, clean, and reassemble machine guns until they could do it in the dark. He made them fire until the barrels glowed. He taught them what the manuals could not. How to keep a gun running when mud and rain and blood were conspiring to stop it. How to clear a jam in 3 seconds when 3 seconds was all you had. He made them ready. Whether the island would let them survive was a different question. February 19, 1945, D-Day, Iwo Jima. The sky was clear, the sea was rough, and the island ahead looked like it had already been destroyed. The bombardment had lasted 3 days. 723 vessels sat offshore. The battleships had pounded the island with shells the size of automobiles. 70,000 Marines waited in transports, watching the smoke rise. The Navy believed their shells and bombs had destroyed the island's defenses. They had not destroyed anything. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi had spent months preparing for this moment. He had studied every previous American amphibious assault in the Pacific. He knew the bombardment would come. He knew it would be massive, and he designed his defenses to survive it. He built a fortress inside the island itself. 11 miles of tunnels, thousands of interconnected gun positions, bunkers reinforced with concrete and volcanic rock, artillery hidden in caves with steel blast doors that opened only to fire. His orders to his men were simple. Let them land. Let them crowd onto the beach. Then kill them. Shortly after 9 in the morning, Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone's Amtrak ground onto the black volcanic sand of Red Beach II. The sand was unlike anything the Marines had trained for. Volcanic ash, fine and loose, like walking in black powder. Men sank to their ankles with every step. Vehicles bogged down the moment they left the water. Nothing moved the way it was supposed to. And then the island opened fire. Fortified blockhouses raked the beach with interlocking machine gun fire. Mortar rounds walked across the sand in systematic killing patterns. Artillery from positions the bombardment had never touched poured onto the landing zones. Men were dying before they cleared the waterline. Men were dying before they knew where the fire was coming from. The entire landing force was pinned. C Company could not move forward. They could not dig in because the sand collapsed into every hole they scraped. They could not go back because the ocean was behind them. Basilone's Marines were lying in the open, pressed against that black sand. Japanese fire poured into them from positions they could not even see. This is where the past tense fails. Because what happens next is not memory. It is happening. Basilone does not stay down. He reads the position, sees the blockhouse that is killing his men, traces the angles of fire, finds the blind spot, and moves. He works around the side of the Japanese position, alone, under fire that has pinned an entire company to the ground, crawling and sprinting and crawling again, until he is directly on top of the blockhouse. He signals Chuck Tatum, the teenager he trained at Camp Pendleton, the kid who had been starstruck the first day he met Manila John. Tatum opens up with a machine gun, suppressing fire into the blockhouse gun's slits. Basilone attacks with grenades and demolition charges. He directs a flamethrower squad onto the position, coordinates the assault from a spot where a single rifle round could kill him. The blockhouse is destroyed. Concrete and steel and sand blown apart, its entire garrison is dead. Basilone did it almost single-handedly. The line begins to move. Marines who were pinned 60 seconds ago push inland. Men who thought they were going to die on that beach are moving, because one man moved first. But Basilone does not stop. A Marine Sherman tank is trapped. It is driven into an unmarked minefield. Mortar and artillery fire is hammering the position. The crew cannot move forward without detonating a mine. They cannot move back without detonating a mine. If they stay still, a direct hit will kill everyone inside. Basilone walks into the minefield. Under artillery and mortar barrages that are blowing sand and shrapnel in every direction, he guides the tank forward, step by step, calling directions to the driver, standing upright in the open while the island tries to kill him. Every step is a calculation between the mines he cannot see and the shells he cannot dodge. The tank reaches safety. The crew survives. Basilone keeps moving toward airfield number 1, always forward, always at the front of the assault, always where the fire is thickest. He reaches the edge of the airfield. Open ground, flat volcanic rock, no cover. A mortar shell lands. Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone is killed instantly. It is not yet 10:30 in the morning. He has been on Iwo Jima for less than 90 minutes. He is 28 years old. He has been married for 7 months. Chuck Tatum saw him fall. The boy Basilone had trained. The teenager who had watched Manila John teach him to strip a machine gun in the dark. Years later, Tatum remembered what went through his mind. If John Basilone could get killed, we all wondered what was going to happen to the rest of us. We lost our hero. His wife lost her husband. His mother and father lost their son. And America lost its #1 hero. The Battle of Iwo Jima lasted 36 days. 6,821 Americans were killed. 19,217 were wounded. Of the 21,000 Japanese defenders, only 216 survived as prisoners. Basilone's actions on Red Beach II helped break the Japanese defense at one of the most critical points of the invasion. Marines who were dying on that beach moved inland because he moved first. The blockhouse he destroyed had been holding an entire company in a kill zone. The tank he guided through the minefield carried men who would fight for 35 more days. For his gallantry on Iwo Jima, John Basilone was posthumously awarded the Navy Cross, the Marine Corps' second highest decoration for valor. He also received a posthumous Purple Heart. He remains the only enlisted Marine in World War II to hold both the Medal of Honor and the Navy Cross. He is apparently the only Medal of Honor recipient in the war to be killed in action after voluntarily returning to combat. When the news of his death cleared military censorship weeks later, it made headlines across the country. It was exceedingly rare for the loss of a single enlisted man to reach the front pages. Basilone's did. Because America knew his name. Because America knew he did not have to be there. The New York Times ran an editorial titled simply John Basilone, Hero. That last fact is the one that stops you. He did not have to be there. They gave him every reason to stay home. A medal, a career, a wife, a future with children whose names he had already picked. A life that most men in that war would have taken without a second thought. He traded all of it for 90 minutes on a beach made of volcanic ash. The Marine Corps did not want him to go back. The War Department considered him more valuable as a symbol than as a soldier. And from a purely strategic calculation, they were probably right. One man selling war bonds could fund thousands of rounds of ammunition. One face on a poster could convince 1,000 young men to enlist. But John Basilone did not think in strategic calculations. He thought in names. Names of men he had trained. Names of men he had fought beside. Names of men who were still out there, in the jungle, on the beach, in the line. And he could not be safe while they were not. When he was told he would receive the Medal of Honor, Basilone said something that tells you everything. Only part of this medal belongs to me. Pieces of it belong to the boys who are still on Guadalcanal. He meant it. That was not a line for the cameras. That was not a phrase a publicist wrote for him. That was who he was. A man who believed a medal meant nothing if the men who earned it beside you were still fighting and you were not. Lena Mae Basilone learned that her husband was dead on March 7, 1945, her 32nd birthday. The telegram arrived with the worst words the English language can arrange. She was presented his Navy Cross and his Purple Heart, decorations for a husband she had held for 7 months, awards for a war that had taken everything from her. The names they had picked for their children would never be called. The house they had planned would never be built. The life they had imagined evaporated on a beach of black sand 6,000 miles away. On December 21, 1945, she stood at a shipyard in Orange, Texas. She christened a Navy destroyer named US Basilone. She broke the bottle against the hull, and she watched a ship carry her husband's name into the water. After that, Lena stepped out of the public eye. She moved to Lakewood, California, bought a small house, lived there for over 50 years, worked for the electric company, volunteered at the Women's Marine Association, volunteered at the Long Beach Veterans Hospital, helped other veterans navigate the system that her husband had fought to protect. She gave John's Medal of Honor to his parents. She said they should have it. She never remarried. Her niece once asked her why. Lena told her something simple. Great love only happens once. Lena Mae Basilone died on June 11, 1999. She was 86 years old. She was buried at Riverside National Cemetery in California, not at Arlington, where John lies in Section 12, Site 384. Because she said she did not want to cause trouble for everyone. Her obituary notes one detail that says more than any paragraph could. When Lena died, she was still wearing her wedding ring. The ring John Basilone gave her in July 1944, 7 months before he boarded an Amtrak for a beach he did not have to reach. 55 years before she closed her eyes for the last time. His hands were burned on Guadalcanal. The scars never fully healed. He wrapped them in gauze when they cracked open. And then he picked up the gun again. Every time. They told him he had done enough. He said the medal was not his alone. Pieces of it belonged to the boys who are still on Guadalcanal. They told him to stay home. He said he was not a museum piece. He said he was not an officer. He said he was a Marine. They told him he was too valuable to risk. He walked into a minefield on Iwo Jima to save a tank crew he had never met. John Basilone could not be kept from his men. Not by generals, not by politicians, not by the fame that made him untouchable, not by the love that gave him every reason to live. He went back because that is who he was. A Marine who believed the only place for him was beside the men who needed him, not behind a podium, not in front of a camera, on the line, in the dirt, where it mattered. John Basilone was buried on Iwo Jima in a makeshift grave. In 1948, his family brought him home. He rests at Arlington National Cemetery. Section 12, Site 384, white marble against green grass. Lena wore his ring for 55 years. She said great love only happens once. She was right. If this story stayed with you, if you felt what it cost, share it with someone who should hear it. Hit subscribe and the bell so the next story finds you. We do not make these for the algorithm. We make them for the men and women who lived it, and for the families still carrying what they left behind. The next video is already waiting. Click it now.